Good day, everyone, and welcome to the Sound Archives. My name is Christian Maiorino, and I am the host of this channel. So, today's episode is going to be the last in my Ozzy Osbourne versus Ronnie James Dio series. If you haven't watched the other videos yet, please go back and watch those and check those out. So, basically, what we've done here is chronicled. Um, all the albums, well, not all the albums, but I would say most of the notable albums that Ronnie James Dio and Ozzy sang on, really going all the way back to 1975, and the albums that Dio did with Rainbow and Ozzy was doing with Sabbath, and pretty much chronicled their respective careers um, up into the 2000s. So today's episode, um, like I said, will be the last in the series, and this will be comparing the albums "The Devil You Know" and "13." So, of course, after many years, you know, there's been different reunions with Sabbath. So coming into the 2000s, we had a couple of different reunions going on. So obviously you have Dio getting back together with Tony and Geezer and Vinny Appice, and Ozzy also getting back with Tony, Geezer, and not Bill Ward, for various reasons. Anyway, going back to the Dio reunion with Tony and Geezer and Vinny Appice. So obviously they toured together as Black Sabbath back in the early '80s. Of course, initially Heaven and Hell, Bill Ward did play drums on that, but he quit mid-tour, and Vinny Appice came in to complete that tour, and then also did the next album, The Mob Rules, and then when they reunited again as Black Sabbath in the '90s, it was the same lineup that did the Dehumanizer album. Um, so in the middle of the 2000s, there was a greatest hits compilation, Black Sabbath, the Dio years, which they decided to do a couple of new songs for. So they brought Ronnie in. They got Vinny Appice in to do drums. So they did three songs for that album. What was it? The Devil Cried, Ear on the Wall, and what's the third song? Devil You Cried, Ear on the Wall, Shadow in the Wind, I think. Yes. Pretty decent tracks. I'm not really reviewing those today. But anyway, that reunion right there led to a catalyst of them starting to tour again. And they decided to tour under the Heaven and Hell name as opposed to using the Black Sabbath name. Obviously, at that point, Sabbath had reunited and was touring with Ozzy in the late '90s and into the 2000s. So I guess they didn't want to confuse it with that. Um, of course, ownership of the Black Sabbath name, I guess, at some point had gone back to Ozzy somewhat. Or they were still kind of fighting that at some point with Sharon, but whatever, I guess for those reasons they decided rather than to make a mess and tour under the Black Sabbath name, they just decided to tour under the Heaven and Hell name, obviously named after the first album that they did with Dio, but the fans knew otherwise. So anyway, they did a tour under that name, and then they ended up doing a whole nother full-length album, which was this one right here in 2009, The Devil You Know. Cool album cover right there with this monster thing holding the crucifix, the little pins in it. This is a real heavy, crushing album right here. So, opening the album, we have Adam and Evil. Heavy, slower, plotting song. You have Fear, another decent track. Third track on here, Bible Black, probably one of the strongest songs on this album. It just kind of has that classic. They've done this in Sabbath, but even Dio's done it on its own, where you kind of have this soft kind of opening, and then slowly transitions into something darker, and then bam, it just hits you real heavy right there. Good solo on this one too. I like Tony's solo, and Geezer's bass just kind of in the background of Tony's solo. You get this a lot in the Sabbath sound. It's like, when Tony's doing his solo, it's like Geezer's almost like doing his solo, like in the background right there. Um, Double the Pain. Just love the pummeling bass that you get right at the beginning, and then you just get that crushing heavy riff. Another great song. Rock and Roll Angel, not quite as heavy and crushing as the previous tracks, but a decent song right there. I like the kind of softer breakdown where Tony goes in this kind of bluesy guitar solo. Sounds great. Turn of the Screw, another good track. Eating the Cannibals, this one a little bit faster, more up-paced. Follow the Tears, another heavy song. Neverwhere kind of tries to be a little bit more faster paced. And then closing the album, we have Breaking Into Heaven, another crushing song right here. Almost kind of strange coincidence that the last track on an album that Dio sang on, Breaking Into Heaven, I don't know if that was predicting anything right there. But obviously, sadly, they went out on tour, and then not long after, Dio was diagnosed with stomach cancer and passed away in 2010. So, sadly, this would be the last thing that we would get to hear Ronnie Dio singing on. I'm glad to say that I saw them on the tour before this, and I got to see Dio on this tour. Never got to see Dio with the Dio band, which I did have one opportunity back in 2003, but I was out in California when they played in Connecticut. And then when they were out, the tour hit California, I was back in Connecticut, so I didn't get to see Dio on that tour, which made me sad, but such is life, I guess. I think this album was a lot better than any of the previous Dio albums from the 2000s. It's heavier. I think just better songs overall, and I think the magic was still there. The songwriting with Dio, and Tony, and Geezer, and Appice. The magic was still there as it was with the previous ones. This stands up just as good with any of the other Dio Sabbath albums. I don't know if I like it as much. I might like it as much as Dehumanizer. I don't think I like it as much as Heaven and Hell or The Mob Rules, but it's definitely it stands up with those classic albums for sure. And look, if this is the last thing that we got with Dio, he went out on a high note for sure. So anyway, sadly, that ended this chapter. But of course, a couple years after that, we got news that there would be another reunion with Ozzy and with Bill Ward. Or at least at first we thought it would be with Bill Ward, but then we found out it wouldn't be with Bill Ward. He was presented with what he said was an unsignable contract. So sadly, Bill Ward would not be part of that final reunion to get back together and eventually do this album right here, 13. So Brad Wilk was brought in to do drums for this album. There's also some other bad news that had come out early when this album was being produced, and that was Tony Iommi was in the early stages of lymphoma, which thankfully, he got treatment and he got better from it. So we were thankful for that he was able to get this album completed and do another tour with Ozzy. So just to get into the tracks on this one, first up we got End of the Beginning, which is very reminiscent of the original Black Sabbath song. You even have the bells and the rain going on with this one. But the song almost seems to be kind of like patterned after that track, which, look, ain't bad. It was a classic song. And this is a really good song as well. Next up, you have God is Dead, another classic Sabbath sounding one. Third track, Loner. I just think the riff in this one is catchy as hell. Love Geezer's lyrics on this one. Another great song. Next up, you have the fourth track, Zeitgeist, which, again, this seems to be patterned after like Planet Caravan or Solitude. Those more kind of trippy, psychedelic, ballad type songs, but it's pretty good. I like Tony's guitar playing in this. Fifth track, Age of Reason. This one kind of goes into, there's like different movements, different song changes in this that you get a lot in those classic Sabbath songs where they're doing one thing and then they're going into something else. Hand of Doom is a perfect example of that. Under the Sun off of Volume 4, or also for Volume 4, the opening track, Wheels of Confusion. Sabbath did that a lot in those classic albums where the song would be doing one thing and then, they just go in this completely different section and then kind of go back. Age of Reason, kind of does that, which is great. Live Forever, another good song. Damaged Soul. This one kind of has a more, I would say kind of a vintage sound. Not like a Black Sabbath, but it's this vintage type of bluesy, but real heavy and dark type sound. I love Tony's guitar playing on this one. And then the last track, or was supposed to be the last track, Dear Father. A bit more subdued than some of the other songs on here, but still good. And then you had the, I guess the bonus tracks, if you will. Methodemic, Peace of Mind, and Pariah. Methodemic, which is the only track which is credited to Ozzy for writing the lyrics. Of these three tracks, I think I like Pariah the best. It kind of this bouncy type of riff to it, really catchy. But the other songs are really good as well. So overall, 13, that album, like I was saying before, they were really trying to bring back the classic Black Sabbath sound on that, and they did a phenomenal job doing that. I gotta say, with 13, my expectations for that album were really low. So if you watched the previous video and you heard me talking about those solo Ozzy albums from the 2000s, based on that, I just didn't have high expectations for this at all. When the album finally came out and I listened to it, my expectations were just completely shattered. I think for that reason, partially for that reason anyway, I think that's why I actually like 13 better than The Devil You Know. I don't know, it has the classic feel of those classic Sabbath albums with Ozzy in the early 70s, those first 6 albums. And there's probably some fans out there who maybe kind of criticize it a little bit for trying to sound too much like Black Sabbath. Didn't go in any new directions, but I mean, what else do you want? It with Ozzy playing with Tony and Geezer and not Bill Ward. Do you want a hip hop album? I don't know. But anyway, I would say I was very pleased with that. But look, both albums are really good. But I think 13 just gets the slight edge on this one. Anyway, I will say this though. I think The Devil You Know, I think has a better album cover. I will say that. 13, it's just kind of the tree. The tree's on fire right there. It's okay, but Devil You Know does definitely have a better album cover. So anyway, I mean, this is the last video I have in this series. I gotta say, it's been a lot of fun going back, taking a deep look at all these albums and just kind of comparing them side to side. Um, but just going back and thinking, looking at the career of these two um, iconic voices in heavy metal. I mean, really, they're kind of defined really the whole genre in many ways. Because Black Sabbath is kind of considered the first real heavy metal band, and for good reason. Um, Credit also has to really be given. I mean, not just to obviously the singers themselves and their personalities, but really the other musicians that Ozzy and Dio have worked with, because obviously not just in Black Sabbath, but even through their different solo careers, a lot of the same people have worked with Ozzy or worked with Dio. So of course, we have guitarists. We got to acknowledge, of course, Ritchie Blackmore, Tony Iommi, Randy Rhoads, Vivian Campbell, Jakey Lee, who almost played in Dio's band. He started the sessions for Holy Diver, and then for whatever reason, he ended up going with Ozzy and playing on Bark at the Moon. And then we got Vivian Campbell playing on Holy Diver. The bass players that they worked with, of course, Geezer Butler, Bob Daisley. Not just bass players, but both lyricists. Of course, Geezer writing much of the lyrics for Sabbath, and Bob Daisley writing a lot of the lyrics for those classic solo albums that Ozzy did throughout the 80s. Of course, Jimmy Bain playing with Dio. Of course, going back to Bob Daisley, got to be mentioned that he also worked with Dio on the Long Live Rock and Roll album from Rainbow. So he was playing with Dio on that, and then, of course, went to working with Ozzy. Drummers. I mean, who do we start with here? Vinny Appice, who, of course, played with the Dio era Sabbath, but he also toured with the Ozzy Sabbath in the, I believe, in the late 90s, in the 2000s. Of course, they had Bill Ward touring with them. Bill Ward had heart attack, couldn't do some shows, so they got Vinny Appice to play drums there. So he played with both Ozzy and Dio in that respect. Of course, like I mentioned before, Bill fucking Ward, Cozy fucking Powell. So he didn't play with Ozzy. He obviously played with Dio and Rainbow. Lee Kerslake, another iconic drummer who played on the first two Ozzy solo albums. He's also known for playing with Uriah Heep. So much credit really has to go with all the musicians. And I didn't mention Zakk Wylde, another iconic player right there. Of course, he played with Ozzy for many years. Jeff Pilson on bass. Of course, he played with Dio. So many, it's hard to really name them all right now. But really, all those different musicians and players who helped craft all these classic albums. Credit really has to be given to them as well, not just the singers. I think pound for pound, I think Dio is definitely, or was, a better vocalist than Ozzy. Ozzy could never sing the way that Dio sang. He never had that vocal ability, even at his best on those early Sabbath records. But look, I think Ozzy, his voice is unique. I don't think there's any other singer in metal or rock or otherwise who really tried to sound like Ozzy. I think there are a lot of singers who tried to be like Dio. No one really tried to be like Ozzy. And I think Ozzy, more of a showman, more of a comedian than Dio. Some of those, I know I mentioned this in a previous video, but some of those concert intro videos that he was doing like in the 90s were just freaking hilarious. And I think obviously Ozzy was more popular, not just in recent or I don't know 20 years ago because of his reality show, but even back in the 80s. The notoriety, the biting the head off the bat, the biting the head off the dove, and the partying and the antics, and pissing on the Alamo, those type of things that added the notoriety and more media attention. I think led to more attention being drawn to Ozzy over Dio. But of course, Dio in that era, back in the 80s, was also successful in his own right. Not just the Dio era of Sabbath, but of course, his solo albums in that era, in that time period. Sadly, not so much the later albums, but we already discussed that in the previous video. But anyway, if you like what you see in this video, give the video a thumbs up. Leave your comments below. Subscribe to the channel. And until next time, keep rocking.